commercially, so completion is what's written in the document. Closing could mean, yeah, closing is this. So signing is when people go to sign it, and closing is when actually the completion happens. So it can be a very frenetic time because you're actually matching whether all the conditions precedent have been satisfied or not. And at that time, the real obligations hit. Many agreements have something called a long stop date. A long stop date is what is uh, is a time period between which you must satisfy all the conditions precedent or all the other actions that need to be taken. After signing, if for 2 months, let's say you didn't satisfy the conditions precedent, the deal can be called off. So that's called the long stop date. Okay. What else? Some contracts will have a condition subsequent clause that after the work is done, after the investment is made, some other filing is required to complete the receipt of the investment and to fully validate that. Like MCA filings are required to be made after you receive the investment and issue shares within a certain period of time. You can't do this before you issue the shares. So this has to be a condition subsequent. Otherwise, if the investor wanted, they would have had everything through a conditions precedent clause. Then there are assignment or change of control clauses. So by the way, in a due diligence or when you actually write a due diligence report for a capital markets issuance, this is what actually tells you the business model that is being used for a certain kind of contract, or it tells you where the company has raised investment. It tells you the whole working. Like the operative clauses is what you have to look at when you're trying to understand how a company is doing its business in the world. So assignment and change in control. Assignment says whether the obligations can be assigned, and so usually you will have a lot of barriers or permission requirements from the other side, or there'll be a complete prohibition that you can't assign this. So you need to, when you read the Transfer of Property Act, you need to sort of compare that with assignment. Assignment in contracts is slightly different because here it refers to assignment of benefits and the services you perform. But in the Transfer of Property Act, it is just saying that what you can receive, you can assign. So that's like just saying that pay the money due to me to someone else. This is not that assignment. This is like my performance. Can I assign that to somebody else? Change of control is a very crucial clause. It's there in most of the loan agreements, and whenever you receive an investment, also those change of control clauses are triggered. So whenever you have a key relationship or a financial relationship with somebody, then they will want to know that when your underlying control is being changed. Now, if you were a person, then it was no problem, right? I know that Aditya is Aditya. Like unless I have evidence that Aditya has been mind controlled, and that is very like scarce, and we don't believe in that. But if it's a company's mind is the promoters and the management, and they can keep changing. Someone else can have majority shareholding in the company. So I'm going to have a change in control clause to know that, buddy, if you change, if your ownership changes hands, I need to know, and I have the right of termination. So banks can insist that if there's a change in control, you take our alignment or you repay the full loan. That's pretty onerous. Can you imagine? The bank has not given you money to as equity; it's just giving you a loan, and even then, it can insist on these things. So when the transaction happens, when the investment transaction happens, you either obtain the bank's consent or you actually pay. So that's the process that needs to happen in due diligence. Like there will be confirmation letters from the banks that this consent has been obtained. It's interesting that the subject of due diligence cannot be taught while teaching due diligence, but it happens through teaching all the other things. Then the termination clauses is another operative clause. Clause of how the relationship can be terminated. There are three major kinds of termination. Termination for convenience, which is upon our own sweet wills, and second is termination for breach, if one party breaches the contract, and another could be termination simply by expiry. Okay, when the contract obligations expire, then what happens? Now this needs to be looked at because if it's a crucial contract, then there might be post-termination obligations that you want to be taken care of by the other side. There may be transition or handovers that need to be taken care of. Someone may need to confirm that the transition has happened properly. Also, the duration of the notice for termination has to be long enough. Okay, if it's a termination for breach, you want to make sure that it doesn't happen for stupid reasons every time, right? So most contracts have this clause that if there is there's a breach, the one party will give you a notice, and if it's unrectified for a period of 15 or 30 days, then the termination proceedings can initiate. Otherwise, you will figure out that there are 100 different terms in your contract and something varying from, let's say, one service level changing from 99% to 98.5%, you immediately trigger termination. That defeats the whole purpose of the contract. So you want to have a balance, which is why this is inserted. Okay? And I'm not saying that these service levels are not critical; they are very important. But this clause ensures that the other side has an opportunity to make up for the loss. Um, and there are some risk mitigation clauses. There could be an indemnity, a limitation of liability, a guarantee, and an insurance clause. So everything that could be a risk for you in the contract, that needs to be mitigated. Okay. There will be standard boilerplate clauses. Now, there are two kinds of boilerplate. One set of boilerplate stays the same, like a no waiver clause says that there is, if I don't enforce my right, doesn't mean that I have waived my enforcement forever. If today I say that, hey, every time I will only pay you if you give me an invoice, and I have made a payment 3 times without an invoice. Next time, fourth time, I say, give me an invoice, I'll not pay you. Now you say, no, you've been accepting my payment without invoice for the past 3 times. Please take it now as well. No waiver clause says that, no, I will not do that. There is no written waiver of my right. If I give you in writing that I will accept it in future, then only it's a waiver. That's a no waiver clause, virtually stays the same all the time. An entire agreement clause says that whatever is written in the document is our full understanding. You cannot use any prior or any other subsequent external evidence unless this document is itself amended. So you have an amendment contract to this, which refers to this, then I'll accept it. Otherwise, no. So that's what an entire agreement clause is. Should be there every time because you don't want varying rules of court procedure and evidence act to come into play to say that, oh, we had another discussion and that was the applicable contract, or that the contract got varied by performance, that the document has 80% of our contract and 20% is based on our performance. No, you want only the document to dictate the performance, which is why you have this clause. So then there are these clauses: confidentiality, non-compete, and non-solicit, which can be looking the same, but you need to strategically insert them. They are required in some deals, not required in some other deals, and it requires attention to draft them. Okay. There's a notice and communications clause. You don't want parties to say, hey, I never understood what you said here. I never received your communication. So through the notice and communications clause, the parties agree that what their authorized addresses for communications are. It reduces the chances that they will deny receiving your communication. Okay. Then there is a breach. Then there are breach and enforcement related clauses, which will have what are the damages for breach of contract, what is the governing law, jurisdiction, dispute resolution. Make sure arbitration is there. Most people fail to insert arbitration. You don't have arbitration, your contract is going to be very hard to enforce. Liquidated damages and penalty clauses, you have to see to what extent they are valid and then specify. So there are ways to write the liquidated damages clause in a way that it can be enforceable. When you establish what is the damage, or you have a pre-estimate of the loss you will suffer. So there needs to be some documentation for that also. Now, if you actually advise your client like that, then they will be ending up making better contracts. And remedies for breach. What are the remedies for breach? So one is damages. Now, this is where contract law and the contract drafting part ties in. One is, what is a breach? That you need to define. So if I breach my obligation, so obligation was an operative responsibility. And if I breach that, then I can call a breach. So how do I measure a breach of my obligation? There will be some level of duty, some level of care I have to perform it with, which will be written down. There will be some covenants which will be written down that I promise in future to do these things. Okay, so there's an obligation I have, and I have covenants that I will do these things about it. If I breach any of them, there will be a breach. So what are the remedies? I may get compensation. Now, compensation is a vague term, right? What happens if you breach a loan agreement? You fail to pay the installment? What is the compensation for it? Simple. Pay all the outstanding loan, pay all the outstanding interest, complete the loan agreement, go away. Like that. If you breach an investment agreement, your investor wants a certain kind of rate of return and the investment. Give that and get away. Right? So that is one kind of this thing, remedy. Another remedy is rescission. Rescission means that I am no longer required to perform the contract. That needs to be stated that that breach means my obligations cease to have effect, and now I am entitled to have everything back. then I need to have the right to claim damages if I have suffered losses. I need to be able to claim specific performance if the contract is of that nature. Specific performance is granted in very limited circumstances, but most contracts have some clause around it, especially confidentiality related contracts, because there is no other way you can enforce confidentiality except by giving a specific performance order that stop disclosing this to anybody else. Okay, so these are some of the parts. These are the components of a contract. Now, inside these components, you can keep expanding or reducing the contract. At the end, there's a signature page and the schedules to the contract. And make sure you draft or you stamp the contract at every time. In some cases, you need to register the contract, so make sure that also happens.